for a little inspiration for your mosaic Christmas ornaments? If you're wondering where to start and what materials to use, and if they can even be grouted, then today's video is for you. We'll discuss all of that and create 2 ornaments using different types of glass. Let's get to it. Welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Julie, and on this channel we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. At the time of filming this video, we're on the cusp of the holiday season, but there is plenty of time to make mosaic Christmas ornaments. And what I'm hoping in this video, that I can show you how quickly you can pull your ideas together and execute on them. The 2 ornaments I'll be sharing today were ordered by a customer, and the only requirement she had was that she wanted a mitten and a pineapple. The rest was up to me. I've done a number of videos here on my channel all about how to make mosaic Christmas ornaments, and I'll include a link to the playlist down below in the description so you can check it out. You can access this information by clicking Show More under the video description, and that's if you're on your desktop computer. If you're on your tablet or your smartphone, you can click the down arrow to the right of the video title. So we're going to take basic wood ornament shapes, and we're going to add a lot of personality to them by how we cut and use the tesserae. And you'll see that you don't have to buy expensive tesserae either in order to do this. So in today's video, I'll show you how I turn 2 simple wood shapes into fun ornaments that you can easily make as well. We'll even talk a bit about what adhesives you can use for transparent glass. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. As I mentioned a few moments ago, the substrates are wood shapes. The mitten came with an attached loop for a ribbon hanger, but unfortunately the pineapple did not. So before I get started with prepping the substrates for mosaic, I quickly drilled a hole in the pineapple on my drill press and made it the same size hole as the mitten. And with the substrates being wood, they need to be sealed first before I can add any mosaic work to them. I've done a video here on my channel all about how to prep wood for mosaic, and I'll include a link down below in the description so you can check it out. The next thing I like to do is paint the sides and backs of the substrates. And once the paint dries, I like to sign my name and let it dry. And then finally, I like to seal them. If you want to take care of these 3 steps after you're done tiling and grouting, you certainly can. That works too. But why do I do it before I start tiling? Because I don't want to have to paint the substrates after I've grouted them and run the risk of painting the grout. It's a pet peeve of mine. I don't care for the look of accidental painted grout. I think it looks sloppy. And so to eliminate that possibly happening, I paint, sign, and seal before I begin tiling. But again, it's personal preference. But for me, and how I am, I don't even want to run the risk of accidentally painting the grout, so I do everything ahead of tiling. And yes, I can always touch up the paint afterwards should I need to, but this method and the order of doing things works for me. During this time in the process, I also like to add eyelets to the backs of the ornaments, which gives them a nice finished off look. And one last note before we begin tiling the substrates. A glass grinder or grinding stone can really come in handy when you're trying to smooth the edges of your tesserae. So I'll include a few options for both down below in the description. So let's first get started on the mitten ornament. Since I'm not using transparent tesserae, I'll sketch a design on the cuff of the mitten as well as the placement of a red ceramic heart. Next, I started pulling materials out to see what worked best with the red heart. I knew I wanted to use blue on this ornament, and I really liked this royal blue stained glass up against that red heart. They worked so well together. Using weld bond, I glued down the red heart and then moved on to figuring out how can I use the royal blue stained glass. I'd like the thumb of the mitten to be this royal blue color, so I put the substrate on top of the sheet of glass and traced around it. Using a glass cutter, I cut a strip of glass that includes the shape I drew on it, so the strip is slightly wider than the widest point I drew. And then I cut the strip down even further. Now I can use a glass cutter to score along the marker line that I just traced. I used wheeled glass nippers to cut any areas that I missed when scoring or that maybe needed a little more fine-tuning. So next up is the cuff of the mitten, and I wanted the royal blue stained glass to be on there as well. So I took the remaining strip of stained glass I had just cut and started holding it up to the cuff, measuring, marking, and cutting. This is very rough what I'm doing right here. I'm just getting a general idea of size and placement at this point. Once I was happy with the tesserae, I cut them down even further into equal-sized pieces and placed them on the substrate to give the idea of ribbing on the cuff of the mitten. And then I glued those tesserae down with weld bond. Next, I wanted to add a little row of pink stained glass separating the ribbed cuff from the rest of the mitten. So I measured it out and got the length right, but I thought it looked too thick of a strip. So I cut it down even further to thin it out a little. And again, I glued that down to the substrate with weld bond. Okay, so next up is the background of the mitten, or basically everything else that doesn't have mosaic so far. And for that, I went with white vitreous glass tile, and I'm using 2 shades of white. So I cut down the vitreous glass into random shapes. Now, up to this point, all of the tiling is very structured. So for the background, I'm going to go with a looser tiling pattern. Sometimes I placed the tessera on the substrate and it worked perfectly. No cutting required. And other times I used a marker to indicate where I needed to cut it further with my nippers. What's nice about all of the tesserae I'm using on this mitten is that they're all the same thickness. If I was using tesserae of different thicknesses, I'd probably use a different adhesive. But since all of the tesserae are the same thickness, I can get away with using weld bond since it doesn't add much bulk at all between the tesserae and substrate, if that makes sense. Some adhesives can be bulky, which sometimes you need. But I don't need the bulk or to build anything up on this project since the tesserae are all the same thickness. And once the tiling was done, I got to work on cutting royal blue stained glass for the hanging hoop. Now, as you can see, the loop isn't very wide. So these are really small tesserae here. But I didn't want to leave the loop as wood. I think it'll look really nice, finished off with the royal blue stained glass. And by doing that, it'll blend in with the design as opposed to sticking out by remaining wood, whether that's painted or unfinished. And honestly, it's a small detail like that that really makes a difference. So I put weld bond on the loop and started adhering the small tesserae around it. And because it's a circle, I keystoned my tesserae so they'd look better when on the substrate. And the last thing I'll do to this ornament during this tiling session is I'll glue another eyelet in the front of the ornament, just like how I did on the back. It finishes off the hole nicely. And then I let the ornament sit and dry for at least 24 hours. I'll include a list down below in the description for all of the tesserae tools, materials, adhesives, and grout that I used in this video in case you'd like to make some mosaic ornaments of your own. The second ornament in today's video is a pineapple. Now, I previously made a pineapple ornament here on my channel, and I knew I wanted to replicate the design for this one. So I got started by drawing lines on the substrate for the crown of the pineapple. For the tesserae on the crown, I'm using a mix of glass. So I've got vitreous glass tile, stained glass, and glass tile. And I actually pulled together most of the pieces from my cutoffs container. This is exactly why I keep my small cutoffs from other mosaic projects, because you never know when you might need a small tessera. I did pull out a larger piece of stained glass from my storage containers because I knew I wanted to include a little more of the lime green, and I scored that and cut it to fit. This tesserae is a mix of greens, which I really like. I think it adds a lot of interest to a mosaic when you use multiple shades of a color. And now the crown is tiled. I won't worry right now about the permanent marker on the tesserae surface. If it doesn't come off during grouting, we'll make sure to clean it off later. The next step is to sketch on the substrate to give me an idea or pattern of how to cut the tesserae. Now for the tesserae on the pineapple body, I wanted to use only stained glass. So I got to work holding glass over the substrate and drew score lines on it. I scored and cut the glass, and whenever necessary, I smoothed the edges with a grinder. And then I adhered the tesserae to the substrate. For the rest of the pineapple body, I'll be cutting out fan-like shapes of stained glass. And I'm basically putting the stained glass sheet or piece over the substrate. And I'm eyeballing what the score lines should be compared to what I drew or sketched on the substrate. And then I'm drawing those score lines onto the tesserae with a metallic permanent marker. Each tessera is a multi-step process. Measure, mark, score or cut, and grind. And all of these steps may need to be repeated a second, third, or fourth time as well. Now, this is a good tip when working with transparent glass, so listen up. Because some of the stained glass is transparent, I can't use Weld Bond as the adhesive. And that's not because it wouldn't adhere properly. It's because I sketched on the substrate. But even if I hadn't sketched on the substrate, I wouldn't want the wood to be seen through the glass. Therefore, I can't use Weld Bond because Weld Bond, although it's a white glue, it dries clear. So I have to use a different adhesive on the tesserae that's transparent stained glass. And so for those tesserae, I'm using tile adhesive, which is also known as mastic. Now I could also use white thin set or white epoxy sculpt. But honestly, tile adhesive is the thinnest adhesive of those options, and I'm trying to keep all of my tesserae at the same level on the surface. Because the tessera is transparent, you have to smooth adhesive over the entire back of the tessera because it's going to be seen. This also means bulky thin set or epoxy sculpt would raise up your tessera and you'd no longer have a level surface. So by using the tile adhesive, which is white and dries white, It covers up the pencil marks on the substrate surface. It also enhances the color of the transparent stained glass. So I continue to cut these little fan-like shapes out of different shades of brown stained glass. And once I was done tiling, I made sure to clean up any adhesive that may have oozed out. And then I let the ornament sit and dry for at least 24 hours. I'll include a list down below in the description for all of the substrates, materials, tools, tesserae, adhesive, and grout that I'm using in today's video in case you'd like to make some mosaic ornaments of your own. The ornaments have been sitting here at least 24 hours and I'm ready to get started with grouting. As you can see, the mitten has the eyelet that we glued in earlier, but the pineapple does not. I'll glue in an eyelet once that area has been grouted. So yes, it's coming. To keep grout out of the loophole of the mitten as much as possible, I put a toothpick in there to clog it up. However, I'm not going to do the same to the pineapple because I need grout to build up in that area around the hole opening on the front, and you'll see why a little later in the video. I mixed up dark gray grout and got started. If you aren't sure how to mix up grout or you're interested in coloring or tinting your grout, I'll include links to videos down below in the description. I'm always more gentle when grouting when it comes to ornaments. The tesserae are so small and I just feel like I need to go slower. I'm pushing the grout into the grout line in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion. You also want to make sure that you rub the grout along the edge of the ornaments to fill in any spaces or gaps between the tesserae. A toothpick can also help in not only removing grout during the cleanup stage, but also in getting grout into tight spaces like the crown of the pineapple. And then once I'm done grouting, I'll let them sit here for 10 to 15 minutes before I proceed. Okay, the ornaments have been drying and are now ready to be cleaned up. I'll remove the grout in the same way as I put it on, which is rubbing the surface in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion. As you can see, I'm keeping that toothpick in the mitten loop opening so that grout stays out of it as much as possible. These ornaments cleaned up fast on the surface area of the tesserae. You also want to make sure you clean the grout off along the edge and in any tight little areas like maybe where the cuff meets the body of the mitten or in the crown of the pineapple. When I'm done cleaning off the grout, I like to run an old paintbrush or chip brush over the fronts and backs of the ornaments to try and remove any loose grout particles or dust. With a slightly damp paper towel, I was able to quickly clean off the backs of the ornaments. You see why I like to paint, sign, and seal the backs of my ornaments before I even begin tiling? Now we can see how nicely the eyelet is in place on the mitten, and we want that same look for the pineapple as well. So now is the time to add the eyelet to the front of the pineapple ornament. So I coated the outside of the eyelet with weld bond and carefully dropped it into place on the pineapple. I cleaned up any extra weld bond that oozed out from the eyelet while also trying not to disturb it. And I made sure that the eyelet wasn't placed or resting at an angle, but that it was as straight as possible and aimed towards the eyelet we installed earlier through the back. And then I let them sit and dry for at least 24 hours before I moved on to the next step. The last thing these little cuties need are some hanging ribbons. My favorite go-to ribbons for ornaments are either velvet or satin. Now, because of the colors used in the mosaic and the sizes of the holes in the substrates, I decided to use thin satin ribbon as the hangers. Red for the mitten and brown for the pineapple. I'll include a list down below in the description for everything that I used in today's video in case you'd like to make some mosaic Christmas ornaments of your own. Let's see how well this goes because somebody is playing Fortnite out there and it's hard to keep it under control if you know what I mean. And I think you do. Yeah, it gets a little loud. So let's see how well this goes. Are you getting excited for the holiday? Okay, so far he's keeping it down. I am not yet, to be perfectly honest. I am not getting excited for the holidays just yet. And he stayed pretty quiet out there. I'm impressed because, wow. I hope I get into it this year. It's been a crazy couple of years and I feel like I am due for some holiday spirit, like really feeling it. So let's hope. But here we go. Another holiday season kicking off. I love it. After all, I'm his favorite YouTuber, so he's gonna be quiet for me. That's what he says, that I'm his favorite YouTuber, but I mean, I'm sure he would say that to whoever he met from YouTube, but you know, I'd like to think I'm his favorite, so. For more mosaic inspiration, check out one of these two videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.